Welcome back to the UNC Charlotte Cato College of Education Clinical Educator Professional Development Series. We hope you found the other modules useful. This next one is definitely going to be. This module is all about the STAR 2018 evaluation tool, the rubric and documents that clinical educators and university supervisors will use to assess the student teaching candidate they are working with. Okay, before we look at that STAR 2018 evaluation tool, we need to clearly state that this is a new rubric. So if you served as a clinical educator or before that as a cooperating teacher, this is not the same rubric you used in the past. Yes, the name sounds the same, but we've updated the rubric and adjusted how that scoring is collected. So if you have old versions or forms, please do not use those in lieu of this current 2018 version. Another quick note about this new STAR 2018 evaluation tool is that we have put it fully online. Yes, there's going to be forms to print and sign, but having it digital will allow for greater access, collection, and analysis of the data. Okay, here's our brief agenda. Once I open up the STAR 2018 evaluation tool, we're going to do the following. Scroll through the rubric, discuss the organization and the elements. We're going to take a look at the scoring levels as well as the scoring sheets to fill out. After we look at the scoring, we'll talk about the evidence guide, the observation feedback form. We'll also look at the self-evaluation and the cycle of observations for the student teachers. Finally, we'll finish up with some important reminders. All right, we're ready. Let's dive into this STAR 2018 evaluation tool. I'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. All right, here we go. This is the STAR 2018 evaluation tool. Okay, let's start with the actual rubric directions for the different stakeholders. We've got the student teaching candidate, we'll have the clinical educator, and the university supervisor. They will all make use of this rubric, but there are a few differences. There are three very important items I'm going to draw your attention to now, and I'll repeat later. The STAR elements are progressive, and some of those items are not observable during an actual in-the-moment observation. That's okay. You'll be able to check the candidate's progress via many forms of evidence to complete the STAR rubric. The OFF, or Observation Feedback Form, will be those in-the-moment actual observation notes. Therefore, this is not for recording overall progress. The OFF can impact the STAR, but the STAR should not really impact the OFF. Lastly, and most importantly, on that STAR rubric progression, the goal for candidates will be to score a 3 or proficiency in all categories. In order to accomplish this score, the candidate must hit all the evidence items listed for that category. Okay, so now that we've done some direction clarifications, let's take a look at that rubric and its organization. Here is the actual rubric. As you can see on the left-hand side, there's a column for elements, of which there are going to be 10 total. The rows across for each column show the levels or scores the candidates will be showing evidence for. These scores range from 1 to 4. As you can see, a level 1 is emerging, a level 2 means developing, a level 3 is proficient, which is the target, and a level 4 is accomplished. In each of the columns for the rubric score or level, you'll see evidence or descriptor items that your candidate will need to have shown in order to meet those levels. This next part is very important. In order for a candidate to be deemed proficient or accomplished on any of the 10 elements, they must have proof of each evidence descriptor item in the column. In the emerging and developing columns, they can understandably show less in that they are clearly not yet proficient. All right. Now that we know the organization of the actual rubric and score levels, let's take a quick look at each of these 10 elements. On the first page of the rubric, we have element 1, instructional strategies, and element 2, learning environments. Following on the next page, we have element 3, student differences, element 4, planning for instruction, and element 5, application of content knowledge. Our next page shows element 6, assessment, and element 7, digital teaching and learning. As we scroll to the final page of the rubric, you can see element 8, collaboration for student success, element 9, professional learning and reflection, and element 10, student teaching course requirements. All right, I'm going to stay right here and clarify the scoring process for candidates by looking at element 9, professional learning and reflection. It is described as engaging in ongoing professional learning and continually self-evaluates and seeks feedback on teaching practice, assumes and maintains high ethical standards. All right, now let's see what proficiency means on this element and how a candidate would show or have proof of this. You might have trouble determining what forms of evidence would suffice. So to help eliminate any confusion, we have a handy evidence guide that you can refer to within the STAR 2018 file. This is the STAR Evidence Guide. This will be a very important tool for both the clinical educator and university supervisor to use this coming semester with their student teaching candidate. As you can see, we have all 10 elements highlighted. On the left-hand side, we have artifacts to review. And in the center, you can see there are key questions that you can ask yourself or your candidate in order to determine if the artifacts do in fact meet the criteria for each element at the level of proficiency or greater. Okay, let's take a look at element 9, professional learning and reflection. This is the one that we just took a look at in the scoring rubric above. The artifacts here to review would be evidence of communication, like emails and phone calls, professional development attendance documentation, observation of practice, and CE feedback. The key questions here would be, to what extent does the candidate proactively seek out professional development opportunities, including College of Education events? To what extent does the candidate accept constructive feedback and makes changes to the practice? Also, to what extent does the candidate model high standards of ethical conduct on the co-ed professional dispositions? Here we are back in the rubric looking at element 9, professional learning and reflection. As you can see in the third column, for proficiency, there are 3 descriptors. These descriptors match the questions that you just read through to ask yourself or your candidate about the artifacts that they would have prepared to meet this element's criteria. So you can see the evidence guide is going to be very helpful in helping you, the CE, and the university supervisor determine if student teachers are making proficiency or accomplished levels. So now we know the elements, the rubric scoring levels, and the artifacts in order to show evidence on the rubric. So now let's quickly discuss where to record this evidence. What you're looking at here is the Clinical Educator University Supervisor Scoring Profile Sheet. The first column, just like in the rubric, shows all 10 elements to be scored. When you look across the rows, you will see a place for the actual scheduled observation, for which there will be 4 formal for each candidate. Under each observation tab, you can see a space for the level score on the rubric for both the CE and the US. It should be noted that since we are looking at the scoring sheet, and you can see that the CE is listed above the US, this is an indicator that the clinical educator should score the student teacher on this form before the supervisor arrives. Remember, the scoring order for observations will be the candidate self-evaluation on the same observation done by the CE. Then the CE records, and then the supervisor at a later period, perhaps 1 to 2 days, after the scheduled CE observation. Let's take a closer look at how this breaks down with an additional visual we've titled the observation cycle. So this helpful visual breaks down the process nicely. As you can see, the first row shows the student teaching candidate's responsibilities, followed by the CE right underneath, and finally the university supervisor. Clearly marked here, the candidate teaches a lesson for the CE to formally observe and collect notes on. The candidate does a self-assessment. I'll show that form momentarily. The CE records progress at this point in the STAR, and the CE and candidate have a post-observation conference to prepare for the supervisor visit in the next couple of days. The supervisor will then follow the same process as the CE, and all 3 stakeholders will then conference after this observation. This process will repeat every 2 to 3 weeks during the semester. Right now I want to show you the student-teacher self-assessment form so it's clear what the candidate will complete during this process, as the rest of the documentation is for the clinical educator and university supervisor only. This is the STAR student-teacher self-evaluation. As you can see, this one-page form has all 10 elements that align with the scoring rubric and the columns for the 4 formal observations and space for the candidates to write the score level they believe they are at during each observation period. They will record a 1, 2, 3, or 4 here and can have notes and artifacts ready for the different conferences to explain their position. At this point, I want to reiterate that the STAR scores are going to be representative of scoring periods every 2 to 3 weeks and not directly from just the actual observations by clinical educators and supervisors. Can the actual observations impact scores? Absolutely. But the observation itself has its own form called the OFF, or Observation Feedback Form. We're going to take a look at that form next. The OFF, or Observation Feedback Form. This form is very straightforward and meant to record notes from the actual scheduled 45, 60, 75, or 90-minute lesson that a clinical educator and university supervisor will observe. The sections have space for general notes, strengths, and areas of need. And most importantly, the priority items that you want your candidate to work on for your next observation and that of the university supervisor. This form will drive the different conferences between the clinical educator and candidate, and then the CE, candidate, and supervisor. As you can see, there's a place for the date and signatures. It is imperative that this form is discussed and signed, as it will be evidence of the observations and that all parties understand the items that were discussed. This is the STAR observation signature page. This final form should be completed after the post-conference that involves all 3 parties, the candidate, the clinical educator, and the university supervisor. This form documents the observation and the conferences that have been held and the scores and notes that were recorded. As you might remember in the video module about required documents, these 2 items were briefly discussed. We emphasized these documents, the OFF and the observation signature page, to show evidence of growth that our candidates will show throughout the semester, and it gives them an idea of where they stand at different intervals and what they will need to do in order to ultimately meet proficiency and be recommended for licensure. We have reached the end of our tour of the STAR 2018 evaluation tool. Please stay tuned for some important brief announcements and information regarding this series of professional development modules. Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed that tour of the new STAR 2018 evaluation tool. Remember, we totally understand that this is a new document and questions are going to arise, but be rest assured that we've trained all of our supervisors to use this new rubric, and they will be a great resource to help you navigate this upcoming semester. Please have questions ready for supervisors at the initial visit, but don't hesitate to reach out to them at any point during the semester for assistance. Remember, we're all in this together for the benefit of the student teaching candidate, but most importantly, the students in your classrooms. Well, at this point, you may only have one video module of the 4 left to complete, and that one's all about the candidate's EdTPA project. We hope you find that one helpful and informative because we've definitely updated that information. Here's a little recap. There's 4 total videos to watch, a survey share questionnaire to complete, an e-signature on the confidentiality form, and some financial paperwork to help process your honorarium. We know the beginning of any new semester brings with it lots of responsibilities, and we do appreciate your time on these tasks. Thanks again for watching, and see you soon.